pleased to be joined, and we greatly appreciate his time, Anthony Treash of Pro Football Focus. Anthony, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
Doing pretty good. Happy we can finally catch back up. It's been a minute, and since then, it's been all positive for the Gamecocks. Hell of an end of the year for them.
Yeah, dude, let me ask you that. We'll just go ahead and dive into it and start there, man. I mean, how shocking is it? I guess we haven't talked in a couple of weeks, but South Carolina out of nowhere has the offensive explosion against Tennessee. Obviously, Spencer Rattler's best day, throwing for 6 touchdowns. You then look at the rivalry game. Gamecocks going to that one. They open up as a 16-point underdog. The line's at 14.5 when the game is played. And South Carolina, yet again for the second straight week, I thought kind of played like the favorite in the ball game, if you will. Just talk about how surprising it was to you to see the end of the season. I mean, because certainly it was for me, right? I mean, I was on social media parading around saying that Tennessee was going to destroy the Gamecocks and that South Carolina didn't have any chance. And most people agreed with me and thought that was the case. And I mean, the finish to the season that we saw, one of the more surprising finishes, not just in South Carolina circles, but I mean, across college football. I don't know if there was a team that made a more dramatic resurgence in their final two games or their final stretch than the Gamecocks did.
Yeah, I mean, if you told me that in the preseason, I wouldn't have been too surprised because that's kind of the way I thought the season would transpire. In our PFL College Football Preview magazine, that's what I wrote. I said South Carolina, they're not going to be a contender, but they're going to play spoiler to the teams that are. Um, as the season went on, it didn't look too great. And even before the Tennessee game, I was right there with you. I thought they were gonna lose decidedly. I think I said it was gonna be like a 30-point game potentially. We saw a different South Carolina team, and considering where they were at, just with the losses, big loss to Florida, losing to Mizzou, it seemed like it was setting up for okay, this team 6-4. They're playing two teams that are in the conversation for the college football playoffs still. Are they going to be able to hold their own? And you could see reasons why maybe they lose some gas, lose some juice, and they wouldn't be as confident as maybe they would have been earlier in the year. But Shane Bieber challenged them, and they rallied. Of course, come out with those two massive, massive W's to get to 8-4 on the season for what I think is a highly successful year. I mean, and really, you could probably point to every single facet, even in the Clemson game, right? I mean, you have an early pick six, and when you have one of those miscellaneous touchdowns like that, it's hard to kind of overcome. But they battled back again through. Spencer Rattler turned it around, and he played a good football game in the end after that. So I mean, it was kind of surprising given the state of where South Carolina was in that moment. In the preseason, I wouldn't have been too surprised, but as the season went on, the way things played out, I was surprised. So that's a testament to the coaching staff, rallying those players. Marcus Satterfield, and we've talked a lot about him, but he had a hell of a 2 weeks there. I mean, really, I mean, you could just give a pat on the back, kudos to everybody. I mean, it was just a great, 2 games against very, very formidable opponents.
Let's talk that Clemson game, Anthony, a little bit because you look at it the way it started for Spencer Rattler specifically, and I love talking Rattler with you because, of course, again, I love the fact that I won't say you went against all odds, but you were obviously one of his most vocal supporters throughout the preseason, throughout the regular season as well. And that final game, I thought you really saw the resiliency, of a Spencer Rattler. The way it started, you throw a pick six, you throw a red zone interception, things are just not going your team's way early on. You fall down 14-0. And I really felt like it was almost, you could say that Clemson game was more impressive than the Tennessee game was because everybody has a game where it's all clicking, right? Everything just falls into place. And we knew he had the talent to do so. But to be able to respond to the adversity and bring your team back, and he lowers his shoulder and gets the touchdown, shows the willingness to put his face in there and do what his team needs him to do. The beautiful deep ball to Antoine Wells later in the game. I mean, so many big plays, especially in that second half. Just what you saw from Spencer Rattler and how impressed you were from number 7, the way he was able to rally the Gamecocks and in turn lead them to victory.
Yeah, extremely. I mean, and he didn't do it against, a lesser opponent, right? It wasn't like I don't mean to throw a stray here at Vandy, but it wasn't like he did this against Vandy where he's struggling and then turning around and lit him up. But we do it against Clemson that still had a pretty tough defense. I mean, that's nothing short of remarkable. And I think it's a testament to the player he is. And, I was actually watching him this morning, just kind of going through the whole course of the season, just seeing how he kind of progressed. And I felt like in that Tennessee game and in the Clemson game, you really started to see kind of the player we were all expecting from the get-go, right? The player that we saw at Oklahoma early on. It was the confident Spencer Rattler, right? And I think we kind of saw that there. So just kind of bouncing back from that, I definitely think it helps his case too, with depending on what his decision is this offseason. He's got a big choice to make whether he wants to go pro or come back another year. I think that game definitely helps, kind of having that in your back pocket, just being able to bounce back, not getting in your own head, and just letting it get out of hand and fighting back there. Because, like you said, I mean, having a pick six, coming back from that is tough. A red zone interception, I mean, that's also crushing. It can kill a lot of confidence there, but it didn't with seven. And he came back from that. So I thought all in all, just I thought you kind of saw his traits start to really shine. Just the arm talent, the ball placement, the accuracy. Again, still got a lot of stuff to clean up on, but you start to see just that natural talent kind of come through. But also just the resilience is huge.
Back-to-back wins to close out the season, Anthony, in games in which you were 23-point and 16-point underdogs, respectively. You beat top 10 teams back-to-back for the first time in school history. You finished the season 8-4, 4-4 in league play, good enough for a third-place finish in the SEC East, only behind Georgia and Tennessee, of course. National perception of Gamecock football in your mind moving forward. How does it look for Shane Beamer's squad?
Looks pretty good. I mean, it's still a pretty big mountain to climb to get to that consistent elite status. But just the fact that, I mean, 2 years ago, right now, it was looking horrible. I mean, it seemed like South Carolina was going to be in a long drought and they weren't going to be able to fight back, relatively soon. They had the great year above expectation last year when they're expected to win just a couple of games. We managed to win a bowl game. And I think they kind of hit the higher end of the scale in terms of what they were able to accomplish in the end of this year. So I think you have to look at the years to come in the Shane Beamer era and really be confident about what this program can really become. I mean, I think you've started to see the positive impact from a recruiting aspect, and I think if you can continue to add to that, I think that's how you can start to build up to getting back to that consistent elite status. So I mean, I think this is as impressive as 2 years as we've seen from a head coaching perspective in recent memory. And definitely a lot of high hopes there. I mean, I'm still bullish on Shane Beamer in South Carolina in the short and long term. I definitely think Beamer has shown, he has what it takes to be, one of the best coaches in college football and building up, a program that was depleted into potentially a juggernaut. I think he has that in him. So, I mean, all in all, it's still been just a remarkable start to what he's done as a head coach.
Mm-hmm. Now, Anthony, you look at Spencer Rattler's draft stock, and he's got a decision upcoming, right? It was a rough season for the majority of the year, but those final two games, the way he finished, and he has indicated he will indeed play in the Gator Bowl against Notre Dame. But when you look at him, I mean, it's I know it's kind of tough because we're not in there, we're not having those conversations with the kids specifically, and at the end of the day, the decision's on them. But if you were advising Spencer Rattler, right, looking at his potential, what his draft grade is, where he most likely will be picked up, what would you advise? Do you think he's better served coming back to South Carolina for another year under a new OC, I might add, or do you think he should go ahead and make the jump to the next level?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question, and NIL definitely goes into that.
Yes.
What's the difference there? That's the other thing that's added to it. That's pretty significant. I think probably all things considered, I would probably lean towards coming back another year. I think just with the way this quarterback class is shaped up, right? I mean, he wasn't going to be after last year. He wasn't going to be that top tier guy, that top 10 pick. This class, I don't think is rich of those consensus elite quarterback prospects like we have seen in the past. I think it's just rich of mid tier guys that have some upside, but you got to be kind of hesitant on taking them pretty early. And like guys I'm speaking of, like Anthony Richardson of Florida, Will Levis of Kentucky, I would still throw in that group. Yeah, Hendon Hooker, even with the ACL injury. Michael Penix Jr. would have been in that boat, but he's coming back another year at Washington. So, I mean, I definitely think that also played in part to Penix's decision to come back to Washington. So I think he could probably serve himself much better by coming back another year. And just given the way his career has gone, I think teams are going to be a little bit, very much more hesitant with him as opposed to some of those other guys. And that's where he could kind of fall out of the picture, maybe slide a little bit. And I think he could have, if he has a big year, let's say the way he performed down the stretch. The second half of the season, I thought from him was awesome. And if he can kind of piece that together throughout the whole course of a season, it could possibly change everything for him. So I do think that would probably serve him best, but you can't fault him for going to the pros. I think he's deserved the opportunity. Again, I like him. I like his skill set. I would take him probably earlier than what the consensus is. I haven't really looked around, asked around to see how people feel about his draft stock right now, but I would probably assume I'm on the higher end of that scale. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think for South Carolina, obviously that would be an amazing thing if he came back. And I think it would probably it could kickstart something special for the Shane Beamer coaching tenure at South Carolina too. So I mean, I don't think he can go wrong either way. But I would lean coming back. That's for sure.
Yeah, you think, Anthony, Rattler's definitely a guy that's going to shine in the combine or workouts or what have you, just because of his skill set, like you mentioned. And certainly, it's funny how quickly things can change, because I think obviously when you're not playing well, and there's a lot of people out there like, well, if you want to go pro, it's fine. Now, like, everybody's just begging, Spencer Rattler, please come back. Let's run it back one more, right? But I think you make a great point. The NIL could factor in when you look at the draft slots and how much guys are getting paid, and these NIL packages and everything they're putting together. It's I think there's a real conversation to be had there. Talking about the OC, Anthony, there's names floating about, Kendall Briles, Garrett Riley, Phil Longo from North Carolina. Dan Mullen got shot down yesterday when he said, hey, they're going to find a good OC, but it ain't going to be me. I don't know that I'll ask you on a specific name, but I know we've had this conversation all season long, but I know you're going to have a unique vantage point because we've interacted all season, and so you followed Gamecocks football closely all year. And then, you factor in Spencer Rattler potentially coming back. Offensively, what direction do you think Carolina should go? And I think you and I would both agree that this OC hire, this next one, it's very important. It's pivotal Shane Beamer hit a home run on this one or get this one right. In regards to philosophy or schematically or just overall, what are your thoughts on the vacancy, and who do you think they should target or what they should be trying to do moving forward on that side of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, and also too, what comes first. Are we going to see Spencer Rattler make his decision, or are we going to see an OC hire first? And I think that could be telling a little bit. I personally was advocating for Dan Mullen, so I was disappointed in that. I think that would have been a good fit for him. It would have been a great thing for South Carolina. I know Florida fans do not like Dan Mullen. I love Dan Mullen. I still think he's a great coach, and just considering what he has done, he's proven it. But that's not going to happen. I think obviously whoever it is, hypothetically, let's say Spencer Rattler does come back. I think it would be very, very important to, kind of let him play his own game. And we talked about it a lot. It's playing to the strengths of your players. I think that's, something that I really value when looking at a lot of those coaches. Some people have differing opinions on it, but I definitely am a big advocate of playing to the strength of your players. Don't force them into a system that they may not be comfortable in, or they may not, they struggle to develop in. And in college football, it's very, that runs rapid in a lot of cases. Just kind of doing what you've known as opposed to adjusting there. So I think that's probably the overall theme, and you can get like very nuanced with it, but it's finding somebody that is willing to change, not kind of being stuck with what they've been taught, what they know already and what they've done. It's being more open-minded and considerate to what personnel you have and playing to that. I think that's probably the big theme that I would kind of look at with an OC hire. But definitely, like I said, the big thing with this I'm looking at is what really does come first. Is it the decision with Spencer Rattler, or is it the OC hire? Because again, I think that could really say a lot about the program.
Switching gears a little bit, Anthony, I want to get your take on this. We just talked Spencer Rattler and the role that NIL can play. Your thoughts on NIL and transfer portal, because as we're seeing, Jaheim Bell and Austin Stogner, both in the Gamecocks, hit the portal. I think over 1,000 players now at this point are in the transfer portal. And you're a guy, and you guys at Pro Football Focus, you do both the college and the pro game, which I just saw. Shout out to you all. Highlighting Kingsley Enagbare, who's having a phenomenal season with the Green Bay Packers. But anyways, it's something that you and I haven't discussed all season long, which is kind of crazy when you think of how big of a role it plays in college football. Just your overall thoughts on on NIL, transfer portal, the role that it's playing in college sports now in college football. Because again, in turn, it is affecting the pro game because a lot of guys that maybe would have made the jump or felt like they needed to for their families, for their situations, they can now come back and benefit off NIL. Heck, we're seeing players on current rosters get lured to other schools, right? And it's open. I mean, it's out in the open. Hey, kids got a chance to make life-changing money. I think you heard Wake Forest's head coach say something about his quarterback. Hey, if he can go make life-changing money, it is what it is. So your overall thoughts on NIL transfer portal, is it good for college football, bad for college football, in the middle? Where do you stand on it all?
I think it's great for college football. I love all of it. And you're always going to have somebody finding the bad examples. There's a lot of cases of some kids not being able to find schools after entering the portal. And that's a true thing. But at the end of the day, yeah, I think you're seeing far more good with it. And specifically, I'm looking at, also those guys that can make life changing money because you never know what can happen from an injury perspective, right? A lot of that could be taken away. You can't plan for that. So kind of securing that as soon as you can is huge, but also just seeing a lot of these group of five players. Like I've seen so many star group of five players that are very underrated enter the portal and they're going to get awesome opportunities to showcase their talents at the power five level. And it's only going to help them from there on out, help their development, also help their draft status, just kind of showing like, hey, I can hang with these guys. And that's what I love about it. And we see it too with FCS guys, like a guy like Juice Wells, right? Coming from James Madison, he was a star player there, but he showed he can be a star for an SEC program, right? Now that the fact that we're able to see that, I love it. It's absolutely awesome. So I'm all for it. There's always going to be bad situations that come from it. But there were horrible situations with the last system that really kind of made it difficult in a lot of ways. And, even though there is a lot of movement, I think there definitely needs to be some change with the timeline of events because I know staffs are working 24/7. It's one thing after another and a lot's, blended together for them. So I definitely think for the lives of people in college football, it's better to have a structure in place. But overall, it's hard to argue anything other than this is an awesome thing for college football. And at the end of the day, it is about the players, and we're seeing good happen for the players. They're making money, they're profiting off of their name, image, and likeness. In a lot of cases, they're sharing that with their teammates that may not have the opportunity to do that. And they get to show the case their talents for other premier programs where they otherwise wouldn't. So again, I think it's just a great thing for the sport.
And you mentioned Anthony too. South Carolina, you could argue there are a few teams in college football that benefited more from the transfer portal than the Gamecocks. When you look at Rattler, Wells, Christian Beal Smith, Devontae Reed, Austin Stogner, the list goes on and on and on. So, with the latest events, it's tough, but live by the sword, die by the sword, my friend. It's just the reality of college football. And like you mentioned, I'm not envious of the job that these head coaches and these support staffs and all the above have to do in regards to recruiting high school players, their own rosters, the portal. It is certainly they're earning every penny of their paychecks these days. That's for sure. Anthony, I appreciate you taking the time. And before we get you out of here, we're not going to dive into specifics of the game, obviously, but South Carolina, Notre Dame in the Gator Bowl. Just overall thoughts on the matchup. And when you look at the bowl schedule, where you think it kind of ranks? I feel like it's probably one of the better games of the bowl season. Early spread from FanDuel came out 4.5. I think the Fighting Irish are favored by, but certainly I would think with portal and everything else, so many moving pieces, that probably moves. But I'm expecting a really good game. I haven't done a deep dive on the Fighting Irish. The only game I watched was when they played Clemson earlier this year. But just your overall thoughts. Again, I think a great bowl game for Shane Beamer in year two, taking the Gamecocks to the Gator Bowl for the first time since the late 80s.
It's such an awesome bowl game. You look at these two teams, they're two rising programs, in my opinion, in a lot of ways. I know there's a lot of rich history with Notre Dame, but just with the coaching staffs in particular, I think they're two of the best coaching staffs in college football. So for me, it's an awesome bowl game and matchup that I'm very much looking forward to. And I think overall, you look at the entire slate. We see them all over, and I definitely think this stacks up with them. I think this game, Texas Washington, those are some of the games I'm most looking forward to. In addition to everything else in between, because I love college football. But this is definitely going to be one of the better bowl games that it's pretty even there. So I'm very much looking forward to it on December 30th. A little primer for the college football playoff.
Georgia, Michigan, TCU, Ohio State is our playoff. Who's your pick to win it all? Does Georgia go back to back, or does somebody else outside of the SEC step up and take the crown home?
Yeah, I feel like I changed my opinion by the day. I think we will see Georgia, Michigan in the Natty. I'm pretty stuck with.
Mm.
I could see a case for either one. I think with Michigan, the allure there is that I think JJ McCarthy is an awesome quarterback. And I do not think that they've fully untapped what he can do. We started to see it over the last couple of games, but I think if they get to a point where they really need him to make some plays, we can see a level of JJ McCarthy that we haven't seen because they haven't really needed to break it out. So I'm going to be I think they very much have a ceiling that a lot of people don't recognize. And that one makes me think Michigan can have a shot in this one, even with no Blake Corum, who I think is one of the best players in college football. Clearly, he was a Heisman candidate before the knee injury a couple of weeks ago. So it changes by the day, but I think it's probably going to be either Georgia or Michigan. And, maybe today I'm kind of feeling Michigan, but we'll see if that holds.
Anthony, again, man, I just want to say thank you so much, man. I appreciate you taking the time, not just today, but throughout this entire college football season. It's truly been a pleasure having you on, my friend, and look forward to working with you again soon, man. Take care.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Take care, my friend. Good stuff.